Hello, everyone. My name is Cindy Gruden. I'm the Dean of the College of Engineering and Physical Sciences. I'm a licensed professional engineer and a two-time CEPS alumnus. We are thrilled to present this webinar to the UNH community featuring alumni from our college. We understand that embarking on a new professional journey can be both exciting and challenging, which is why we have assembled a panel of experts to provide you with helpful guidance and practical strategies. Each of our panelists will share unique perspectives about their time at UNH and their professional paths. Whether you are early in your career or have decades of experience, this event will provide you with valuable insights. At this time, I would like to introduce our moderator for this afternoon's program, Stephanie Whitney. Stephanie is a higher education professional with more than 8 years of experience in academic career advising, student affairs, and retention management. She currently serves as the career director for CEPS and is a member of the UNH Career and Professional Success Team. Prior to that, Stephanie served as an academic and career advisor at Mount Washington College. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology from Bridgewater State University and a Master of Art from Assumption University in school counseling. Stephanie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for kicking us off, Cindy, and for the warm introduction. I appreciate it. Really excited to be here today with this group of panelists. I think this is going to be a wonderful session. And before we kind of kick into the discussion, I think it would be great if we just had the panelists introduce themselves. So just a short intro about yourselves, your tie to UNH, and why you're here today. And I'd like to pass it off to Eric to start this discussion.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Cindy, so much for the invitation to join today. I'm a Sunapee native. I graduated from UNH in '90 with a dual degree in mechanical engineering and German. Since then, my career spanned everything from advanced product development to strategy consulting, venture capital, and operative management in life science and tech. And I've funded or ran about 50 companies, and of which 4 of the endeavors would classify as unicorns.
Thank you so much, Eric. Passing it to Les.
Hey, good morning, everyone. And it's actually morning for me. I'm out in Los Angeles today, even though I live on the East Coast. So it's great to be here again. Stephanie and Cindy, thank you. So I'm a 1987 graduate. And a bachelor's in civil engineering. And I took that degree toward the construction field, where I've spent my entire career kind of working my way up into leadership roles in construction. And I now run a large $1.5 billion national construction company in the US, hence why I'm out here in Los Angeles. And yeah, I look forward to a great discussion today.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, I'm passing it off to Deb. Oh, Deb, you're muted.
Hey, hi, sorry about that, muted. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This is an awesome opportunity to really talk about some interesting things around career transition. I am currently a fractional chief marketing officer. And that was a huge transition for me because I graduated from UNH in 1982 with a degree in math and computer science. So this has been a long journey for me, lots of fun. I am on the advisory board for the College of Engineering and Physical Sciences and work with Cindy. I also mentor a student a year at UNH, so I'm very connected to the college and have a lot of fun doing that. And yeah, I'm grateful to have this opportunity to just chat about something that is really passionate to me. So good. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for your introductions. Before, I have some questions prepared for the group so that we can jump into the discussion. But before I do that, I just want to remind the audience that there is the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We encourage you to ask questions throughout, so you don't have to save them for the end. We're going to go through Q&A at the end, but ask the questions throughout, and then we'll open it up for those discussions at the end. So with that said, I'd like to jump into the first question I have for the group. And that question is, how do you feel that UNH prepared you for where you are today? And what are some of the takeaways from your education and your experiences? Is there anyone that would like to jump into that first? did UNH prepare you for where you are today?
I don't mind. I'll start.
Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, obviously, one of the things that's really interesting about my career, I started out as a rocket scientist. So math and computer science was really important to that. And UNH certainly prepared me to do that. And I maneuvered my career beyond that. And I think I was able to do that because of a variety of different ways of learning. You know, when you're at college, you're studying, you're really learning how to learn. And I think that was really the foundation for me of how to move from one thing to the other, is my ability to understand what needed to be learned, dig in and dive in and really take the opportunity to, I guess, become an expert in a field that I certainly did not graduate with. So I think that one takeaway I would have is use your college education as a way to learn how to learn.
Deb, I agree with that. And I when I think about kind of my experience and I think about it from the context of coming onto a construction site, my very, very first day with this engineering degree, and I had the superintendent on the project said, "Can you read these blueprints?" And I was embarrassed that I actually couldn't do it. And I wasn't taught any of that in my 4 years, or it was in between my junior and senior year. I wasn't taught any of that in my engineering degree. And, you know, I learned it on the job, but what I really, you know, learned over time and over my career is that, you know, the engineering school teaches really kind of problem solving, how to identify variables, logical thinking, deductive thinking, and really ways to solve problems. I agree with you, Deb, ways to learn, different ways to learn, but then applying those ways to learn in how you solve problems. And so for me, I think, you know, I very much that, and I've frankly done a little presentation to some of the engineering students there before, and I love to put this like Harvard Business School stat up that say more CEOs come from an engineering background than any other background. I think that's testament to kind of learning how to solve problems.
I think Deborah Leza absolutely spot on, and I could only reflect exactly the same sentiments. Stephanie, I'd actually, if you don't mind, turn this around a little bit, because buried in your question was, what did you get out of UNH? And I think I would turn that back on the audience and say, you know, what did you do with your time at UNH? Your whole life is a series of opportunities. And some people are lucky to have more than others. Some of us are lucky to have gone to UNH. And the question is, what did you do with your time? And so one of the things that I learned, and I can remember a professor forcing us to think for ourselves, was you have an opportunity here. What are you going to make out of it? Right? What do you need? How are you going to get it while you're here? And you'll find that as a recurring theme through life, that you've got to decide how you're going to convert the ingredients that the truck dropped off into a meal.
Yeah.
That's
well, just chime, Eric, you used a term when we met called assets, right? And I love that term, and your education, you know, gave you experiences. You either capitalize on opportunities and learn something and move forward or not. But you do eventually come up with a set of assets, which is, I have good math skill. I have, you know, I understand physics and the physical environment. I understand how to work in a group setting. I understand how to enter a lab and conduct an experiment. Just a set of assets that you start to collect over the course of your career. And I loved that term when you threw it out.
I would agree with that. And I think the other thing that, you know, you learn at UNH and certainly carries over through your career is how to live, work, and be with other people. And I think UNH gives you that opportunity when you're thrown into a dorm to kind of figure out how to communicate and interact with the people around you. And, you know, even further, when I went to UNH, you know, computers were very much at their infancy. And it really was, you know, a group of us who hung out and worked together to solve problems together. And so for me, I learned how not only just to learn, but how to communicate better. And I think one of the things obviously that has done me really well is my ability to communicate well. And, hence I turned that into a job that does that full time. Marketing is definitely a communication skill. But I don't think I would have been able to know that or figure that out if I didn't have the ability to work with people and understand how to explain a problem, explain how to solve it, and then figure out how to do the solution. So very important skill set. And I think we all take that away from UNH, right?
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And Eric, I like that you turned my question into a question to the audience. I think that was fantastic. So I appreciate that. And some really great things that were shared out. I was hearing a lot about transferable skills and just kind of taking it with you, the skills that you learned while at UNH and applying it more broadly. So I think that's fantastic. The next thing I would love to ask the group is, really kind of reflecting and thinking about, how did you end up where you are now? Knowing that you've made transitions and shifts and pivots along your path. So how do you end up where you are now? And how did you make the choice of where you wanted to go next?
Can I give you an honest answer, Stephanie?
You certainly can.
The truth of it is, it's a combination of hard work and serendipity or luck. And anybody who tells you otherwise is being untruthful. You have to, luck favors the prepared mind. You have to work hard. You have to set goals. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. You need to pursue them. You'll get scars on your back along the way and create joyous memories. But ultimately, where you end up is a combination of setting goals, working for them, and a hell of a lot of luck.
Yeah, it's funny, Eric. I so I'm in engineering school at UNH, and it's between my junior and senior summer, and I get a job in a construction company for the summer. And I thought I was like, I hit it big time. I was previously working at a department store for $4 an hour, and I got this construction job for $10 an hour. And I thought it was the coolest thing. And then I get there and I see, there's some structural work and things like that. And I see some connection to this engineering I'm getting, but not a lot. And it so happened that the Channel 11 TV station at UNH that as you enter was getting built. And I got a job my senior year on that. And, I took surveying, and then surveying certainly applies to building buildings. And I said, wow, I really like this connection. So it happened very early for me, but it was a bit of that opportunity was there. And I kind of jumped on it, and I cleared my senior schedule to have Tuesdays and Thursdays off. I worked a full day on that site, and I ended up liking it. I graduated and I felt obligated to go interview at engineering design firms, which I did. And I went through a series of interviews and said, I think I'm going to like this other thing on the construction side. And back then, construction wasn't really, they just barely started to hire engineers into the space. And so, that was kind of my lucky movement. And then I will tell you that the rest of my career has been just work harder than everybody else, take every opportunity that I could grab to kind of learn a new skill, try a new thing. And then, to move all the way up. And we talked about this is, I realized very early in my career was a technical skill gathering time. Mm-hmm. Then you realize if you want to move up, you have to learn how to manage people. And so there's kind of this middle phase of my career, which is all about managing people and becoming a better manager, a better coach, and being able to get things done through people. And then there's the kind of next jump up is managing, a division or managing, and then a division comes with about 3/4 of the responsibility. And then there's managing an entire company. So, and there are different skills I had to gather to kind of make it to those next phases as I went through. And I think understanding that you can be a technical expert, but if you don't kind of work hard on your management skills, leadership skills, coaching skills, it will be hard to kind of move up.
I would agree. And I think taking a little bit from each one of you, serendipity definitely played into my success, but determination was by far, I think, the biggest driver. So when I started my career, I literally was a rocket scientist. I worked with, a very strong engineering firm, developing and coding, software for what they call boost and reentry vehicles. So basically rockets. And I loved to talk about what I was doing and didn't really like the coding so much, but I loved talking about it. But I had an opportunity to move to Europe. I moved to Europe and I started a career as an engineer in another company. And I just didn't like it. And an opportunity, serendipity, right? Opportunity came up that said they needed someone who understood math that could work on a risk management software platform, but they didn't need anybody to do the coding or anything. They just needed someone that could talk about it. And since I could talk math all day long, I ended up with the role. And I was bit by the marketing bug, right? So now I literally have to tell you, this was the most amazing job ever. I traveled to every banking capital within Europe selling a risk management platform I knew nothing about, but I could talk math and I was really smooth. So that kind of bit me with the marketing bug. And then after that, I was determined. I was like, no holds bar. I was going to be a chief marketing officer one day. I didn't care what it took. And like you, I spent a lot of time learning, figuring out the soft skills, the people skills, and the marketing skills. And luckily for me, I stayed within the technology space. So my goal, what my background brings is my understanding of technology. And it makes it a little bit easier for me to figure out how to communicate something on terms of its benefits and value points to a client, because I understand what's going on in the background, right? So yeah, serendipity, but definitely determination was a big part of it.
And passion.
And passion. Yeah,
Passion's a big one.
Yeah.
Deb, I would add to that just that, it took a while for me to realize that as the CEO of a large company, my number one job is marketing. And so if you get to a higher position, you are sales, you are marketing, you are the one telling the story and having people not only follow you, but people hire you and join you.
It seems like the further you go along in your career, the more you become a translator. And you become a translator between the technical world, the marketing world, the sales world, the finance world, the human resources or human capital world, right? Each one has its own language, and there are a lot of people who specialize in one language. In the end, as you move on in your career, it's about gluing those things together and serving as a fair and trusted translator among them all.
That's a really good way to put it. Yeah, really smart.
I wrote that down. That's how good that was.
But you're right.
I have my pen and I'm taking notes too. I thought the same thing. Like,
yeah, I do think it's interesting because a lot of times I'm the mouthpiece for leadership, and it really does come to really understanding, one, how to communicate to people within an organization. So most of the time it's also employee communication that I deal with. And I think, the leaders generally tend to know what they want to communicate, but they learn that from years of experience of working with people. And I think that's one of the things that if you're going to do a career transition or you're going to move within an organization upward, you really need to figure out how you are going to communicate and effectively with the people around you. So, some of the times I remember that there was a lot of people in the business school who would complain about having to do group projects. And I was always so jealous of them because we didn't really do that in engineering. You did them on your own and you maybe asked for help and you collaborated with other people, from the engineering, group or team of people. But the business teams were always doing these fancy projects where they were doing them together. And I would say that's the one thing that I think is really important. Take advantage of the opportunity to collaborate with other people and get something done, because leadership comes from that. Knowing how to get other people to do something is like the most important thing you can figure out what to do. And that adds to your skill sets. And again, how do you grow in an organization, or how do you transition if you don't really understand the world around you?
thank you. That's fantastic. And I think we kind of dipped into the next question a little bit, which is perfect. It almost kind of set us up for it. But, what advice would you give to people transitioning careers or choosing a new position? I know we just talked a little bit about communication, getting involved with teams and kind of rising up through that. other pieces of advice that you'd give to people transitioning careers?
So I'm happy to start. If you're making an outright kind of shift to an entirely different career, and you know, I deal with it within our own company when people want to come in and join us from something else, or someone who wants to move from an entirely different function to a different function. And I kind of, rather than this kind of very linear kind of uphill path of your career, if you can kind of step back and visualize, what are all of the skills you've acquired? I agree. You have to be able to communicate about your own skills. What do you bring to the table? Other than the thing that you became an expert in, which you're not leaving behind the thinking about it, but you're leaving behind the exact thing, and you're going to apply that to something else. And I think you have to think through your own way that you're going to apply yourself to this new set of you have to learn in any role that you're going to shift into. You have to learn the technical foundation of that role to some extent. Even if you're a really great leader, you still have to learn what you're leading, what you're doing, what you're selling, the core value proposition of your company or your role. And I'd say my biggest piece of advice is to have a little patience. Any employer who says, okay, you're coming in, and I've got internal candidates who may have the technical skill and they're developing their leadership skills, but you have all this life experience and leadership skill, but I'm going to find it really hard to pay you the same thing I'm paying that person, because you have to come in, have a learning curve, and then you'll probably accelerate. And I think just kind of having that a little bit of a real expectation, and think of it as not so perfectly linear. Think of it as this lattice work that's kind of, you're moving up in your career over a little bit, maybe down 1 to go over 2 to go up 4. If you kind of think of it that way, as long as the kind of mean line you draw through that is taking you where you want to go, you're fine. So have a little patience in the transition period, I would say. I
would agree with that. I mean, I was talking to a woman who I worked with a few years ago, and she's been a phenomenal chief head of human resources, CRHO. And I was asking, she was actually in transition, and I was talking to her about it, her transition and what was going on. And she was like, I've been in these big companies, but I want to be in this role. But that means I have to take a step back and learn these things in order to move this forward. And I thought it was really smart, because she's very far along in her career, and she's had some phenomenal titles and been through some amazing, transitions. And she still, to this day, was saying to herself, sometimes I just need to take a step back, relearn and regrow, and then figure out how to apply that to the next role that I want to do. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. And certainly that's something that I did. I took a step back when I moved into marketing. The company actually came to me and said, you're paid an engineering salary, but now you're in a marketing role, you're kind of overpaid. And I'm like, well, you can't cut my pay now. But that, literally that can happen. You can end up in a situation where that step to where you want to get to might mean taking a step back. And there's nothing wrong with that, because if you are able and willing to do that, that means you're a risk taker, and the rest will come forward. You will figure out how to get that and move forward. I think the one thing I would say is don't be afraid, right?
Deb, it's a great segue. Transitions can be scary.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It sounds simple. It's start at A, get to B, and what needs to be true to get there, and figure it out and get it done. But actually, transitions are scary. And as life goes on, when you're leaving UNH, your life is all optionality. So you can experiment, you should try, and you should try as many things as you can, as quickly as you can. Transitions later in life are different, because optionality starts waning over time. So I guess one of the things I'd say is life is short, and be really purposeful how you use your time. If you want to experiment, do it with purpose, do it quickly. As time goes on, pick your passions, and then overlap that as you pick your industry, because it's a lot easier to work in an industry that's growing and has high margins than one that is shrinking and has no margins. As we say, the rising tide floats all boats. So learn yourself quickly. Sample, check, taste, experiment. Figure out who you are and what you love. Overlap it with places that are attractive to be. And then that process of saying, okay, I'm at point A with the assets that Les was talking about. I want to get to point B. And as Deborah told us, that may not be linear. It may not even be related. And then you can ask yourself, okay, what needs to be true that I get there? And then you're just applying the structured skills that you learned at UNH.
Thank you. Wonderful. So when I think about the audience that's on today, and who might be tuning in, there could be people that are in a point where they know they want to do something different, but they're just not sure what that is. They don't kind of have an idea of what that next step is. There could be people that want to transition and they know what they need to do, and it's just kind of accelerating and getting there. I guess for those that are a little bit more in the space of not really knowing exactly what that next step is going to be or that transition is, how can an individual assess their skills, their strengths, their interests to really determine what that next, career path transition might be? Any suggestions? And I think some of you, some of the panelists, Deb, you had mentioned the fact that I'm a rocket scientist, and then I kind of get into this role where it's more talking about the math, and I realized I really like talking. And so that's kind of how that marketing path kicked off for you. Would love to just hear from the group in regards to, for someone who might not have had that experience yet of now I know that this is kind of the path I want to take. How can someone assess their skills, their strengths, their, interests to determine what that path might be?
So I'm going to take this one from a marketing perspective. So when I come in as a marketing officer, fractional wise for a company, one of the first things I do is what's called an assessment, right? To try to understand what's going on in the market, try to understand what's going on with the customers, try to understand what's going on with the competitors. And I kind of feel like you need to do something very similar in a smaller scope. So what I usually would do is talk to people who are clients, right? And ask them a bunch of questions. But then I would say, if it's me and I'm trying to figure out me, it may be worth talking to former bosses, current bosses, friends and whatever, and just kind of getting an assessment like, what do you really think is the strongest point for me? Like when I was working with you, what did you see as the thing that you were like, wow, when I want to do work with so-and-so, or I want to do this kind of work, this is the person I think about. What is it? So that's the first thing. And I think the second thing is, what's your passion? That's kind of in a company is you got a product and you got to sell it. So, what is your passion? That's your product, right? What do you really like doing? For me, it was very easy. I love to communicate. And I love to engage people in a communication. So, that made it really simple for me. And then knowing I knew how to communicate about technology was really helpful, right? Somebody said, you really know technology, you really understand math, you can communicate this. So I got that kind of that feeling from somebody. And then I also got the validation of what I wanted to do. And I would say that would be, for me, 2 things you would do an assessment of yourself, take the time to really think through what it is that you're really strong and capable of, and then figure out how that applies to an area. I would say some people might even be transitioning, right? For me, financial services technology is it. I've been in other industries, but it's like watching the paint dry for me. When I talk about financial services technology, I get so excited. I just think it's the best thing ever, right? So I knew what I wanted to do and I focused on that area. And I think that's kind of what you got to think through, all those different passions, all those different interests, and just try to boil them down into something that makes sense to you. So I call it an assessment. I mean, other people might call it something else, but yeah. I'd love to know what Eric and Les think on that. Is that how they would do it?
Les?
Yeah, I love that. And I think, and it's funny, we have this kind of 3-year training program of folks that have just come out of college, and they try 3 different roles. And at the end of that, they pick one. And we do a graduation of the 3rd years every year. And I do this exact kind of talk about what do you want to do and why. And we talk a lot about, vulnerability. And I think if you're doing an assessment and you want to get real feedback, you have to be okay with being a little bit vulnerable and saying, and I think you have to open up to people and say, and it doesn't, if you're in a current role in a company and you don't want to signal that you want to make a transition, you still want to be the best that you can be in where you are, right? And so I think I give advice to these young professionals to say, when you're in a meeting, really look for feedback loops. And when you're assessing yourself, ask, it could be a peer, it could be your boss. How did I do in that meeting? When did you see me kind of shine technically? When did you see me maybe not shine technically? When did you see me light up a little bit? What do you think I'm more passionate about than less passionate about? And just take notes and pay attention. I think so much of it is about pay attention to yourself. And we really make very little time to do that, to really pay attention to ourselves, get that quiet time to assess yourself. So I love the word assessment, but I also think to really get to the right place, you got to put yourself out there a little bit.
Fully agree with Les, and that's tougher than it sounds, especially early in your career. Maybe some of you also had the experience. As you leave school, you're still in the shadow of your parents. You're then in the shadow of your professors. You have friends' opinions, and so finding yourself is sometimes not that easy through all that noise. It's a real learning time, and don't be scared of it. Embrace it. And Les said something which I just thought was spot on, which is be the best you can be. Always ask and listen. And it's not just the good feedback that you get. You want to be listening to. You want to be listening to the negative feedback. That's the important feedback. And if you can, find a couple of mentors who truly care about you, you have a good chemistry, and they love you enough to tell you the truth.
So I'm going to add on all this to say one other thing. So when I was at a company, there was a woman who was working in the area that I was working in, and she was an admin, and she absolutely hated her admin role. But she knew she was stepping into a company that could be really interesting for her. So she wanted the job because she knew it was going to be an interesting company. And as I was the head of marketing, I hit it off with her, kind of took her under my wing. And at some point I said to her, what do you want to do? And she said, I really want to be in event marketing. And I said, well, what are you doing about that? She said, well, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, ask for it. And she was like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I may have extra space on my team for someone who could do some help with some of these events. You start helping my event manager with some of these events, maybe something will come out of that. She's now still in that company and she's the event manager. So if she hadn't had that conversation with me and expressed her interest in what she wanted to do, she would still be in a role where she was not happy, or she would have left the company or something different. And instead she grew into phenomenal, and she's doing a great job. So I would say the other thing is, don't be afraid to put yourself out there, find a mentor. In this case, she found me, and ask the question, this is what I want to do. How can I get there? And they may be able to give you the path to achieve your goals.
I totally agree. I think you as business kind of leaders and managers of groups, you're kind of going about your job and you're not maybe thinking about every person's kind of, development desires on their path. And so I do think, we encourage our folks to let us know what aspirations you want to have. And there's a balance between staying in your role and doing a great job and wanting to move. And if you constantly want to move and do new things, you do have to, to some extent, do what the company needs you to do. But let us know what you aspire to, or maybe you want to make a change. And it's our good. Certainly my goal is, and I say this to our people all the time, I want you to have any career you want under our roof. And to do that, you have to kind of signal that and we've had admins with zero technical ability, without a technical, education, say, I want to actually get into project management of construction, and we get them there, and we'll get them there. And so it is ask for it. I think it's signal that you may want to be doing something else. And while you're doing that, but I'm here to do the job I'm doing. And, I want you to know that have me on your radar screen.
I would say that, I kind of watched my daughter's career at a software company, and I've been intrigued. She started in there as an implementation manager for the software at the very low level. And she did the job phenomenally, but she literally did not like it. She was complaining about, I literally cannot stand this. But she was smart enough, because she's really, outgoing, to make relationships with all kinds of people in the C-suite and in the level, like very junior person, but she's talking to the CEO. She's getting involved in things where she gets the visibility. She ends up moving up in the implementations team and still hates the job. And eventually she's like, I can't stand this. Like, is there anything else? And so they kind of moved her around. And today she's now the head of investor relations for the company, which is a completely different job. And it's a completely different maneuver. But the thing is, she wasn't afraid to make relationships. She actually went out of her way to ask the chairman of the board to be her mentor, which I mean, literally, that took a lot of guts. And so, like, she was willing to put herself out there and be gutsy. She loved the company. She loved what they were doing. And she was determined to stay. And she was willing to work with them to help figure out how she can get to where she wanted to get to. And now she's got a career and she loves what she's doing. So I would say you literally, you can't be afraid, but I think relationships are extremely important. You have to be willing to put yourself out there and build a relationship with people that you may think may be too senior for you to have a relationship with, or that you may think that they're not going to want to have a relationship with. But people are people. I mean, if you're an outgoing and ambitious and a great human being, people are going to engage with you no matter what. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there.
The whole determination story and reaching out to people reminds me of a short UNH story. As I was leaving UNH, I wanted to be designing jet engines, and one of the places that you could do that was in a NATO institute in Belgium. And coming out of UNH, I was too young for the role, and they said no. And one day I wanted to go there. I was convinced I wanted to go as a passionate kind of thing. And I was sitting with family in a beer garden in Germany, and on a Thursday night, and I said, something, I'm leaving. And I got up from the table, got in the car, drove 400 miles, and slept in front of the institute. And one of the directors, Serendipity, was coming in the next morning and said, who's this guy sleeping in front of the gates, because it's all security area locked. And I said, look, I drove here on the hope that I'm going to meet you because I want to be here. And he said, anybody who's going to drive 600 kilometers on the chance of having this meeting should at least get a chance. You'll report Monday for a 3-month training period. We'll do an assessment, and we'll either say goodbye or you're in the program. And 3 months later, I was in the program.
Wow.
That's gutsy. And by the way, my first career job, well, my second one after my engineering, was in Belgium. So I'd love to talk to you about Belgium at some point.
Looking forward. And how important personal relationships are, right?
Right. Absolutely. There you go.
Well, this has been a fantastic discussion. I think there's been some wonderful takeaways from it. A lot about communication, building relationships, assessment of yourself, and what kind of might make sense. And it's just been wonderful. And we've got some great questions that are coming in from the audience. So I would love to kind of take the time to switch to this portion of the panel and the event. And the first one I'm going to put out to the group is, what advice would you give a student that gets to their senior year in engineering and starts to think their career interests may be outside of engineering? So maybe a quicker transition than anticipated. What sorts of advice would you give to this sort of a person?
I would say, and just knowing how we I think employers today are looking for, I think it's a more open kind of mindset to really hiring folks from really any background. And I think if you can kind of think a lot about what we talked about what do you think you might want to do? And Eric, I like your advice. If you try something and you don't like it, that's okay. And you know, the years and years ago, it was if you saw a person moving around in their resume a lot, you'd think, oh, that's less than. Today, if you see them moving around a lot and then they're with you, you might say, oh, wow, they've got a nice kind of basket of experience here. So I'd think really go interview for anything you want. I believe, and I'm certainly biased, but that an engineering degree is desirable in any field. Maybe not writing poetry, I don't know, but like any field, I think it's, and we didn't touch on that, but I think the combination of communication skills, engineering skills, logical thinking, and hard work and pushing yourself, you can do anything you want the minute you get out of college. I really
Totally agree with that. Totally agree with that, Les. I would say, you know, what you learn, and I think you said this earlier, what Eric did, both of you, problem solving skills. And most companies have problems, and they're not necessarily just engineering based. And so, but if you can approach it with an engineering mind, and you can look at things from an analytical perspective, and you can come up with a way to solve a problem, you will be golden. There's so many different ways, different, you know, opportunities within companies. And I think one of the things is, if you know that in your senior year, start talking to people now who are in different roles, in different companies, whether that be your uncle, your aunts, you know, cousins, whatever it is, and kind of get a perspective on their company, what they're doing, how it's working, what kind of people would work there. And then you'll be able to figure out, hey, I might be able to apply my engineering skills to that. But I'd say I wouldn't worry at all. Get the degree in engineering and then figure it out. I know a guy, he graduated from UNH with a degree in electrical engineering, and he went into sales, and he knocked it out of the park because he knew how to sell technology.
Right.
He didn't want to do engineering, but he could sell engineering. And that's like, so you can pretty much do anything with an engineering degree. I think. Don't hold back.
There's a holy grail as well, if you can pull it off. Les was describing in his company about programs where you can be put in different areas, then select a program. Deborah, you're describing a similar thing. If you can get into a company, and these are companies like GE and others, where if you're highly qualified, meaning you've worked hard and you've delivered the goods, you perform, they'll put you into a 2-year round robin assignment where you will go through every single function in the company over a year or two. And that is worth gold, that experience. So the engineering degree is the ticket to play. It's not the only game.
Totally agree. Yeah.
Thank you. It's fantastic. So moving to the next question, what advice would you give for someone who feels a bit stuck in their career? You know, kind of the component of in a current role, not really happy, but financially needs to kind of stick with it. You know, how do you stay motivated while you're looking to move into something else?
I would ask the question of why the transition, right? Is it the transition because of the company, or is it the transition because of the role? You know, and, you know, is the current company not offering the opportunities to transition to another role? In that case, I might want to look at, and I mean, finding a job is a full-time job. So it's not easy to stay employed and also use your nighttime and, you know, networking time to find that next opportunity. But I would say, you know, one of the things I think people forget about is people are the way to move forward. And you may have people in your network who are looking for someone with exactly the kind of things that you're looking to do, and they could help you with that transition. So networking, using LinkedIn, finding connections in companies that you're interested in, having conversations with people at those companies. I think there's a lot of way to do it without having to lose where you currently are and the revenue that you're currently getting.
There's a saying in HR circles that people join because of the company and they leave because of their manager.
Yeah.
And so the first stop, if you're feeling stuck, is to find out who's leading you. It's a cautionary tale for everybody, saying, as you're completely wowed by the big logo and the beautiful office building, actually the person you work for is the person you work for. So be selective. But once you're in, focus on who that person is that is leading you, whether you can improve that relationship. And we discussed before about making clear what your goals are. And if it's not happening with that person, or that's just not the right place to be, the first place to look is internally for other opportunities before you start breaking your back on that full-time job.
Yeah, and part of your question is how do you stay motivated? And I think we've talked about it a little bit today. I think, you know, in kind of assessing yourself and putting together your list of skills and attributes, things that you think you do well for the company, things that you add for the company. And then I'd say lean into those a little bit and just, you know, just know yourself that you're doing the absolute best you can be doing right now. I do think signal that, hey, is there something else in the company to do? I'm ready for more challenge. I think framing it that way versus I'm unhappy. It's, you know, I want a new challenge. I want to do some more. And I agree, Eric, you may find you're all of a sudden with a new coach who's more motivating, you've kind of feel better about yourself that, boy, I really have a lot of skills to go out there, and that'll kind of allay the fear to go out and tackle something.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're getting some great questions here and some great feedback from the panelists. So this is exciting. The next question I have for the group: what kind of educational opportunities did you seek out to make the transition? Any more degrees, certificates? Did you find that to be necessary to make your change?
I'll start, and I'll say as I you know, felt like I was ready to move up. At one phase in my career, I knew that the next role I was getting into was going to involve a lot of negotiation, a lot of kind of getting done what I needed to get done. And so I sought out a certificate course that was all about negotiation. And so I kind of went to that. And as I was moving a little bit higher in the company, I went to a leadership institute to really, really work on soft skills and how I spoke to the whole company and kind of all of those things. And so when folks come to me and say, hey, I'm a big fan of be a sponge and get as many opportunities and put as many skills as you can into your kind of toolbox. But think about where you want to go and say, if I want to move to sales, take a sales class, expose yourself to more sales things. If you want to move into a different technical role, learn that at night and see how much you like it. I think, yeah, I would do as many of those things as you can, you know, without overloading yourself, of course. But
the four that come up again and again and again are, strangely enough, statistics. No matter what you're doing, they hit you. It comes back to get you. So embrace it. Accounting will come back to get you. Embrace it. Don't fight it. Embrace it. Soft skills, and that can be negotiation. Your whole life is a negotiation. Sales, especially in the United States, where we start our sales course in kindergarten with show and tell, right? You must be able to sell if you want to be successful, and it'll give you an additional edge as you go abroad, where sometimes those skills are not as developed, other skills are developed. So there's almost a shopping list of what do you want to learn this year that you can keep adding. An engineering degree alone is not really enough. It's like sitting on a stool with one leg. The question is, how many legs can you put under your stool to make it more and more solid?
I would agree. And I literally love that summary. And I would say, you know, when you said sales, when young people ask me what to do, I said, you know what, no matter what, try to figure out at some point in your career how to get some sales experience, because it is all about being able to sell your ideas internally, being able to sell yourself to other people. And so that soft skill, and it could be as simple as learning how to sell ice cream to someone who doesn't want it, right? It's literally that simple. It's just, it doesn't have to be a sophisticated, technical, high-tech sales, process or whatever. It's just learning how to do something a little bit soft in the sales. I think I was thinking about this, I was like, well, I don't really know if I did any of those things. And then you all started talking. I'm like, oh yeah, I did that. Oh yeah, I did that. I took a negotiation class, and I did get a leadership training class, and I'm like, I don't even remember all the things I did. I even very late in my career got a HubSpot certification. Like, why? Right. But I was just like, I want to know everything I can about it, because I just want to be able to know if I'm going into an organization, I'm going to do something and it's HubSpot based, I want to know about it. So, I never stop learning. And I think that's the one thing I would say to everybody: never stop learning. And you will constantly find yourself very valuable to the people around you if you do that.
Thank you.
Bravo.
No, that was great. My next question for the group: how has staying connected to UNH helped you in your career? It's a good one.
You don't want to go? I'll go.
Yeah, I think you go. You seem to be the most deeply connected.
It's interesting. I would say taking on and mentoring a student every year has helped me learn how to better mentor the younger people on my team. So I walk into an organization and I'm given a very junior team of marketers, and I got to figure out how to build them up very quickly to do work very quickly. And so understanding that has really helped me figure out like what to do with the younger students, like what motivates them, how to get them to do something that's different, like how to get them to think differently. And so I would say the mentoring program has been an education for me as much as it's been a help to the students that I'm mentoring. And in fact, when I am mentoring a student, I always make it a mutual relationship. I'm like, you're going to mentor me at the same time as I'm mentoring you, because I want this relationship to be mutual. Because I think you're going to learn a lot by that than me just mentoring you. And so I feel like that has been extremely helpful to me in ways to stay connected to UNH. Besides the fact that Cindy is an amazing person running the CEPS place, and I get to be on the advisory board. So that's also really fun.
One of the ways that I've stayed involved with UNH was through the E-Center, the Entrepreneurship Center. And I'll just tell you how it's helped me in my job every day. As I see these young folks who are so creative, who have started businesses before they've even started freshman year in college. And it's inspiring and motivating. And they talk about new technologies and the embracement of new technologies. And I come back to my day job and say, I need to embrace that kind of youthful entrepreneurship, that kind of innovation, that kind of, and not get a little bit stuck in perhaps the more staid ways of a bigger corporation. So just being around students and seeing each other, and I think you can apply this to yourselves. I find it motivating, inspiring, and effective ways for me to stay really in touch and connected to how the world's changing, because you're seeing it as college students or early college grads. You're immersed in the change, and we're viewing the change kind of in the rearview mirror almost a little bit. So I think it keeps me connected.
We're coming full circle now. We've said that think about what your assets are, and one of the things that you take out of any organization is a network. And UNH is a formidable network. It's a group of people who share similar values and a proud background, and that's a nice thing. It's also, as we move on in life, we're part of a community. We're stakeholders in a community, right? I'd say a few of us here have some scars on our back And we'd like the next generation not to earn different scars, not the same ones maybe. And so it gives an opportunity to give back and share, and community. I think we'll find, if we're not working, I always like to say, we're not working for money in life. You're working for the freedom to choose the people you spend your time with. And if you can be part of that and contribute and share, that's the richness of life, isn't it?
Wonderful. Thank you. Being mindful of time, we have one final question. And the question is, who are the people who influenced you either at UNH or your jobs, and how did you find them? So a little bit ties to the mentor question. If one or all or whatever works for the group, I want to put that out there.
Can I bring one name up here, and Cindy will know what I'm talking about. I'd like to call out Professor Taft, who was running the ME department when I was there, and he was a spectacular leader of the department. And the most important thing that he taught was integrity, hard work and integrity.
Thank you, Eric.
So, I mean, I'm going to be really mushy here. Sorry. But when I made my transition, I moved to Europe. I was living in Belgium and I was moving from engineering to marketing. The person who actually mentored me ended up becoming my husband. And he literally thrust me. I mean, it was amazing. I was very fortunate to have such a great relationship with this human being, and still to this day. But literally he was the one that saw that the capabilities in me and pushed me forward, and still to this day he does that. So I give a lot of credit to him, but there's been a lot of other people along my journey as well. And I think you find them, they stay in your life maybe for a little while, they stay in your life for a long time. And I think there's so many people, I wouldn't even know where to begin. But I would say that's what the great thing about relationships, companies, people, at the end of the day, business is about people. It's all people.
Yeah, I totally agree. You use the word network, Eric. And I think if you're one day out of school and you get assigned, a project at a company that you've just joined, you're going to be working with people at your level, and just think about those people as you rise up through your career and they rise up through their career. You're going to have this powerful network over time of people at high positions. So stay in touch, stay connected, stay curious about what they're doing. And you'll have a lot of different kind of managers and supervisors and leaders over your career. And they're all potential mentors. And I think put yourself out there a little bit and say, hey, would you mind doing a once a month mentorship meeting with me? I would look up the definition and differences between coach, mentor, and champion. Try to understand those. And if you ask somebody to be a mentor and say, I just would love to have a half an hour with you a month to just get, just chat, get some advice. And then I think with every manager and boss you have, you're going to take the good stuff and leave the bad stuff, because we all have our uniqueness, and understand how it applies to your style, your personality, and your set of values. And you'll have a lot of mentors along the way, but think of everybody as a potential mentor that you're working with.
I think the one thing that the younger generation is very fortunate of is the ability to stay connected with people a little bit easier than when we left college. So I would say, connect with the people that you're impressed with on LinkedIn and stay connected with them. And I mean that in terms of, don't be afraid to reach out to those people you really think have added value along the way through your career, and just touch base with them from time to time. Half an hour, 15-minute call. They are as interested in you as you are in them, and it goes a long way.
100%.
Thank you. Well, being very mindful of our 1 minute remaining, real quick, if you had to say one thing, one sentence, one phrase to this audience before leaving that kind of sums this up or pulls it together, what would you want to say to them?
Oh, I would say, don't be afraid, go for it. I mean, if you're, get that determination behind what you visualize yourself as, and don't be afraid, just make it happen.
I would say that as well, but I would say prepare and then don't be afraid.
Typical engineer.
And
Typical marketer, just go for it.
And in full agreement, people.
Thank you. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you to the panelists. This was fantastic. Thank you for the audience for tuning in. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.